Chapter 33. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah the second time, while he was yet shut up in the court of the prison, saying, Thus saith the Lord, the maker thereof, the Lord that formed it to establish it. The Lord is his name. And I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. For thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, concerning the houses of this city, and concerning the houses of the kings of Judah, which are thrown down by the mounts and by the sword. They come to fight with the Chaldeans, but it is to fill them with the dead bodies of men, whom I have slain in mine anger and in my fury, and for all whose wickedness I have hid my face from this city. Behold, I will bring it health and cure, and I will cure them, and will reveal unto them the abundance of peace and truth. And I will cause the captivity of Judah and the captivity of Israel to return, and will build them as at the first. And I will cleanse them from all their iniquity, whereby they have sinned against me. And I will pardon all their iniquities, whereby they have sinned, and whereby they have transgressed against me. And it shall be to me a name of joy, a praise and an honor before all the nations of the earth, which shall hear all the good that I do unto them. And they shall fear and tremble for all the goodness and for all the prosperity that I procure unto it. Thus saith the Lord, Again there shall be heard in this place, which ye say shall be desolate without man and without beast, even in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, without man and without inhabitant and without beast, the voice of joy, and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the voice of them that shall say, Praise the Lord of hosts, for the Lord is good, for his mercy endureth forever. And of them that shall bring the sacrifice of praise into the house of the Lord. For I will cause to return the captivity of the land, as at the first, saith the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Again in this place which is desolate without man and without beast, and in all the cities thereof, shall be an habitation of shepherds, causing their flocks to lie down. In the cities of the mountains, in the cities of the vale, and in the cities of the south, and in the land of Benjamin, and in the places about Jerusalem, and in the cities of Judah, shall the flocks pass again unto the hands of him that telleth them, saith the Lord. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will perform that good thing which I have promised unto the house of Israel and to the house of Judah. In those days, and at that time, will I cause the branch of righteousness to grow up unto David, and he shall execute judgment and righteousness in the land. In those days shall Judah be saved, and Jerusalem shall dwell safely. And this is the name wherewith she shall be called, the Lord our righteousness. For thus saith the Lord, David shall never want a man to sit upon the throne of the house of Israel. Neither shall the priests, the Levites, want a man before me to offer burnt offerings, and to kindle meat offerings, and to do sacrifice continually. And the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord, If ye can break my covenant of the day, and my covenant of the night, and that there should not be day and night in their season, then may also my covenant be broken with David my servant, that he should not have a son to reign upon his throne, and with the Levites the priests my ministers. As the host of heaven cannot be numbered, neither the sand of the sea measured, so will I multiply the seed of David my servant, and the Levites that minister unto him. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying, Considerest thou not what this people have spoken, saying, The two families which the Lord hath chosen, he hath even cast them off? Thus they have despised my people, that they should be no more a nation before them. Thus saith the Lord, If my covenant be not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the ordinances of heaven and earth, then will I cast away the seed of Jacob and David my servant, so that I will not take any of his seed to be rulers over the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For I will cause their captivity to return, and have mercy on them.
Chapter 11. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Hear ye the words of this covenant, and speak unto the men of Judah, and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Cursed be the man that obeyeth not the words of his covenant, which I commanded your fathers in the day that I brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, from the iron furnace, saying, Obey my voice, and do them according to all which I command you. So shall ye be my people, and I will be your God, that I may perform the oath which I have sworn unto your fathers, to give them a land flowing with milk and honey, as it is this day. Then answered I, and said, So be it, O Lord. Then the Lord said unto me, Proclaim all these words in the cities of Judah, and in the streets of Jerusalem, saying, Hear ye the words of this covenant, and do them. For I earnestly protested unto your fathers in the day that I brought them up out of the land of Egypt, even unto this day, rising early and protesting, saying, Obey my voice. Yet they obeyed not, nor inclined their ear, but walked every one in the imagination of their evil heart. Therefore I will bring upon them all the words of this covenant which I commanded them to do, but they did them not. And the Lord said unto me, A conspiracy is found among the men of Judah, and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They are turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers, which refused to hear my words, and they went after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant which I made with their fathers. Therefore thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will bring evil upon them, which they shall not be able to escape. And though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them. Then shall the cities of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem go and cry unto the gods unto whom they offer incense, but they shall not save them at all in the time of their trouble. For according to the number of thy cities were thy gods, O Judah, and according to the number of the streets of Jerusalem have ye set up altars to that shameful thing, even altars to burn incense unto Baal. Therefore pray not thou for this people, neither lift up a cry or prayer for them, for I will not hear them in the time that they cry unto me for their trouble. I have forsaken mine house, I have left mine heritage, I have given the dearly beloved of my soul into the hand of her enemies.
Bid 'em in, get 'em in. That sun is hot and plenty bright. Let's get on to business and get home tonight. Bid 'em in. Auctioning slaves is a real high art. Bring that young gal, Roy, she's good for a start. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. Now here's a real good buy, only about 15. Her great-grandmammy was a Dahomey queen. Just look at her face, she sure ain't homely. Like Sheba in the Bible, she's black but comely. Bid 'em in. Gonna start at 3. Can I hear 3? Step up, gents, take a good look, see, 'cause I know you'll want her once you've seen her. She's young and ripe, make a darn good breeder. Bid 'em in. She's good in the field, she can sew and cook. Strip her down, Roy, let the gentleman look. She's full up front and ample behind. Examine her teeth if you got a mind. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. Here's a bid of 3 from a man who's thrifty. 325, can I hear 350? Your money ain't earning you much in the banks. Turn around, Roy, let them look at her flanks. Bid them in. 350 is bidding, I'm looking for 4. At $400, she's a bargain sure. 4 is the bid, 450. $500 now, look alive, bid them in, get them in. Don't mind them tears, that's one of her tricks. 550 is bidding, who'll say 6? She's healthy and strong and well equipped. Make a fine lady's maid when she's properly whipped. Bid them in. 650, don't be slow. 7 is the bid, gonna let her go. At 7 she's gone. Pull her down, Roy, bring the next one on. Bid them in, get them in, bid them in.
In 1518, Bartolomé de las Casas, a Catholic priest in South America, called on the Spanish crown to use Africans as slaves in the Caribbean and South American colonies rather than the indigenous people who were being subjected to systematic genocide. Spain then dominated the international trade in African people. De las Casas advised that incentives be given to European settlers to stimulate the economy in the so-called West Indies. Any settler who built a sugar mill was allowed to import 20 Africans to be used as enslaved laborers to work in the mills. In the 1560s, the English began their trade in African people. Sir John Hawkins was the famous British pirate in this period who challenged Spain's monopoly of the human trade. On the right is John Hawkins' coat of arms. The 6-month, 3,700-mile voyage from Africa to the Americas, called the Middle Passage, was sheer torture for the human cargo, with hundreds of Africans on a ship. This is an actual photo of children on a slave ship dated 1868. Men, women, and children were captured in their homeland and held in dungeons for months. They were chained into the holds of ships, spoonways, or stacked on top of each other on pallets with the hideous stench of open pits of human waste. The pallets, seen on the lower left, were no more than 15 inches high. On the right is the infamous Door of No Return of the Gorée Island slave castle, where Africans were brutally held until transported to the Americas.
During what is known as the Middle Passage, hundreds of thousands of African people died of disease or starvation, or were murdered for attempted resistance and thrown overboard to the schools of sharks that followed the ships from Africa to the Americas. The ship owners were reimbursed for the deaths of African people by the newly emerging insurance companies such as Lloyd's of London. African and indigenous resistance to the genocidal invasions was fierce. In the 1600s, Queen Nzinga of Angola led armies against the Portuguese invaders and slave traders, never ceasing to fight in defense of African independence until her death at 80 years old. The Ashanti, the matrilineal society of Ghana, resisted colonialism for 200 years. YAHUWAH was the revered Ashanti resistance leader against the British in the 1890s. The Chokwe, Shona, and Zulu people were among those who led powerful struggles against the European invasions.
African resistance on slave ships was constant. For slave ship captains and crew, injuries resulting from resisting enslaved Africans were a major cause of death. Inside the U.S., there was never peace on the plantations. Resistance was constant as enslaved Africans poisoned the slave masters and fought back in countless ways. Africans refused to work and ran away in great numbers. Nat Turner launched a powerful rebellion in Virginia in 1831, striking fear into the hearts of the white population. Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey, and many others led well-organized rebellions throughout the U.S. In Haiti, Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines in the 1790s led a successful African revolution, defeating Napoleon's powerful army and creating the first independent African state in the Western Hemisphere. Both on the continent of Africa and in the Americas, white people waged a daily reign of terror, torture, and mass murder to subdue African resistance. Regular white citizens, including women and children, participated in this violence and voluntarily carried it out. Enslaved Africans were branded, whipped until scarred, shackled, separated from families, mutilated, castrated, humiliated, and degraded.
The entire U.S. economy, North and South, was built on the enslavement of African people. Railroads, taverns, banks, hotels, universities, law firms, insurance companies, and brokerage houses sprang out of the trade of African people. At least 350,000 African people were sold from auction blocks at the Shockoe Bottom in Richmond, Virginia, from 1790 to 1859 alone, spawning immense wealth for white people. The development of Europe and the U.S. into dominant world powers was brought about by the process of turning African people into their most lucrative commodity. In the U.S., the so-called Founding Fathers, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, and others, were slave masters, owners of African people and instigators of the genocide against the indigenous people. This slide shows an idealized, falsified picture of the plantation of George Washington. Known for his brutality, Washington owned more than 300 African people, giving them meager daily rations of a few ounces of grain and fish byproducts. Wall Street was the center of New York's slave auction blocks. In the 18th and 19th centuries, enslaved Africans were 1/5 the population of New York. When the U.S. Civil War was declared, New York was so dependent on the cotton industry that the city considered joining the Confederacy. It is telling that an African cemetery was recently found under the high-rise buildings of Wall Street. American wealth resting literally on the bodies of African people. Europe set up what is called the triangular trade, kidnapping Africans from their continent and taking them to the Americas as a commodity for sale. In the Caribbean and the Americas, European and North American ships picked up raw materials and resources, including sugar, rum, cotton, and tobacco, to take to Europe, where they were manufactured into finished products and sold. Shipbuilding and countless spin-off industries were booming.
The trade in African people brought about an unprecedented wealth that transformed Europe from an impoverished, agricultural, and feudal society into an urban, industrialized, capitalist one. The Industrial Revolution was brought about by the enslavement of African people. In the mid-19th century, Karl Marx began asking, how did capitalism start in Europe? The enslavement of African people, the genocide against the indigenous people of the Americas, the theft of their lands, gold, and other resources, the assault on China, he called this the primitive or original accumulation of capital that provided the initial resources for capitalism to emerge as a system that transformed Europe from poverty to wealth. However, Marx was not able to see that African and colonized workers would be the most important force against capitalist power, not white workers sitting on the pedestal of slavery and genocide. More than 100 years later, Chairman YHWH, representing the struggle of African workers as leader of the YAHUWAH movement, was the first to give significance to Marx's definition of primitive accumulation of capital. Chairman YHWH shows that African and colonized peoples make up the pedestal on which the entire capitalist system rests, and that African workers are the leading revolutionary force as we can see in the world today.
As the Industrial Revolution grew, the serfs of feudalism were evicted from the lands and transformed into workers in the urban factories fueled by the African trade, shipbuilding, sugar milling, and other emerging industries. All white people, including white working people, sit on the pedestal of slavery and genocide. It was the relentless resistance of African people that forced the U.S. to end the slave trade in 1808 and the system of chattel slavery itself in 1865. With the rise of industrialization and growing African resistance, the U.S. and Europe found direct colonialism more profitable, enslaving African people on their own land and stealing Africa's resources. The prospects of direct colonialism, rather than a moral stand, were the driving force behind the bourgeois abolition movement. The colonial ivory trade was responsible for the deaths of more than 2 million Africans in Tanzania and Central Africa, so that North Americans could have piano keys and billiard balls. At least 2 million Africans were slaughtered in the process, 1 African for every tusk. In 1885, the European powers met in Berlin, Germany to divide up Africa for the purpose of extracting Africa's vast resources for the benefit of white people. At this conference, without 1 African present, the entire continent was carved up into the present-day colonial borders and the scramble for Africa was launched.
Just as in America, multitudes of Europeans became settlers in Africa, armed with machine guns and methods of terror as enthusiastic volunteers to steal the diamonds, gold, and natural resources of Africa and enslave African people on their own land. The Belgians under King Leopold slaughtered 10 million African people and chopped off the hands of millions more in the Congo in the process of forcing Africans to harvest rubber and ivory for colonial profit. The Germans murdered 80% of the Herero and Nama peoples in Namibia by rounding them up to die in the desert without food, shelter, and water. Concentration camps and human experiments were used on the Africans well before Nazi Germany, but there was no outcry. Germany has refused to pay reparations to the Herero people, even though they have paid hundreds of millions to Jews. Under colonialism, African people were worked to death, used as beasts of burden, mutilated and terrorized on their own land. Millions of African children were stolen from their parents, now considered genocide under international law. Yet the word genocide was never used until white people killed other white people in Germany in the 1930s.
For lo, I begin to bring evil on the city which is called by my name. And should ye be utterly unpunished, ye shall not be unpunished. For I will call for a sword upon all the inhabitants of the earth, saith the Lord of hosts.
The Congo was one of only a handful of places in the world where rubber grew wild, and Leopold acted quickly to exploit it. He formed the Force Publique, an army of Belgians and Africans, and got them to force Congolese natives into rubber harvesting. It was dangerous work and required scaling the tops of trees where the valuable vines hung. Leopold's rush to corner the world's rubber market led to a whole new form of slavery in the Congo, and a reign of terror so brutal it would become the worst genocide in African history. It began with a hard leather whip called a chicotte.
They would use the chicotte to punish a Congolese villager who hadn't met his quota, and the chicotte basically flayed open the skin, so that apparently after 20 strokes you were a bloody pulp. And if you had the misfortune to have 50 strokes or 100 strokes, you died. So it became synonymous with Leopold's rule, and it was a horrible, feared instrument of torture.
But to the outside world, the Congo seemed like a perfect colony, profitable, productive, and civilized, all thanks to King Leopold. Meanwhile, inside the Congo, things went from bad to worse. When the rubber workers inevitably collapsed from exhaustion, starvation, or disease, the Force Publique shot them and were ordered to cut off their hands.
The Force Publique were issued with bullets, and the officers who were commanding these mercenaries wanted to see results. So for one of these soldiers not to get punished, if he was sent out with 10 cartridges, he had to have 10 hands of his victims. It's proof that he hadn't wasted his bullets. Often, of course, some of these bullets had been wasted, so there was this extraordinary pictures you get of living Congolese who, while they were still alive, had had their hands severed. Leopold set new standards in colonial brutality. I think he did that because he just was a man in a great hurry, and he didn't think of the Congolese as human.
Few statistics were collected at the time, but estimates put the total number of murdered Congolese at well over 10 million.
Devastated by war, suffering crop failure, deprived of slave labor, the economy was in crisis. The African American was the scapegoat. A massive propaganda campaign was unleashed in the press, the schools, and the church, reinforcing beliefs that black Americans were genetically inferior, that freed from bondage, they would revert to savagery. They had to be restrained. The North soon lost interest in the plight of the black American. In 1877, the last of the federal troops were withdrawn from the South. Within 5 years, the Supreme Court overturned the federal laws that provided equality for African Americans. The states' control of civil rights. The period known as Reconstruction was over. Southern states began to enact a series of laws to force the black citizen back into a subordinate class. A climate of intimidation was settling over the nation. A climate that was to radicalize the idealistic young schoolteacher, Ida B. Wells. This was the situation in 1892 when 3 young black men, Will Stewart, Calvin McDowell, and Thomas Moss, friends of Ida Wells, opened a grocery store in direct competition with a white-owned grocery across the street.
The white grocer didn't like it much, and so there was a bad blood between the white grocer and the black grocery store. He went to the city officials and tried to get them to, or the county officials tried to get them to close it down, and said that they were maintaining a nuisance. They were selling beer, and And when the deputy sheriffs arrived, now they didn't have uniforms. They were in plain clothes. It's after dark. Now you see some white folks with guns coming after you. Why, blacks fired on them. You had gunfire, and a deputy was wounded. At that point, the truth must have come out, and so the blacks stopped firing, and the deputies went in and arrested all they could find in the grocery store. Then they went out and arrested everybody in the neighborhood they could find. And so they threw 20 to 30 people in jail.
Within hours, rumors of a black revolt spread throughout the county. A black militia was disarmed. The 3 grocers were dragged from their cells by a mob and murdered. The killers were never brought to justice.
Everybody in town knew and loved Tommy. An exemplary young man. He was married and the father of one little girl, Maureen, whose godmother I was. He and his wife, Betty, were the best friends I had in town. He owned his little home, and having saved his money, he went into the grocery business with the same ambition a young white man would have had. One of the morning papers held back its edition in order to supply its readers with the details of that lynching. It said that Thomas Moss begged for his life for the sake of his wife and his child and his unborn baby. That Calvin McDowell got hold of one of the guns of the lynchers, and because they couldn't loosen his grip, a shot was fired into his closed fist. There's a strong belief among us that the criminal court judge himself was one of the lynchers.
The black community of Memphis was stunned. Wells retaliated with her pen. She wrote an editorial.
The city of Memphis has demonstrated that neither character nor standing avails the Negro if he dares to protect himself against the white man or become his rival. The white mob could help itself to ammunition without pay, but the order was rigidly enforced against the selling of guns to Negroes. There's therefore only one thing left that we can do: save our money and leave a town which will neither protect our lives and property nor give us a fair trial in the courts, but takes us out and murders us in cold blood when accused by white persons. Hundreds disposed of their property and left. Leading pastors took their whole congregations with them as they, too, went west.
And you talk about the power of the pen and of her leadership to be the force behind thousands of black people leaving, and whatever Memphis represented to them was the only thing that they knew. It was where their roots were, where they were working, where their families were. And 6,000 people packed up their bags, went to the Oklahoma Territory.
Recorded more than 300 people had been killed. Newspapers listed almost 100 deaths, but city officials put the death toll at 36. More than 35 blocks of Black Tulsa was burned to the ground. Over 4,000 people were left homeless. Still, Most of the people of Greenwood refused to leave.
After they had completely destroyed the black community, blacks then set about to try to rebuild. They could not get building material to build back in Tulsa or the surrounding community. Most blacks had to import the bricks and steel that they rebuilt Tulsa back with, black Tulsa back with, from out of Arkansas and Kansas.
My father had advised his clients and others to build with orange crates, build with anything, in order to have some shelter. But even so, there are pictures of the winter of 1921-22 of hundreds of tents in which blacks lived because they were not able to build their buildings.
Without any equipment, we moved and built a little shack, and we had to cook outdoors. I remember so well, the rain would come, we'd have to carry our food back in the house, and then after the rain was over, go back and build a fire outside, but we didn't have gas and nothing to cook on. So it was a bitter pill to swallow.
By the time the National Negro Business League met here in the summer of '25, just a few months before we moved to Tulsa, the people who visited here described Tulsa, Black Tulsa, as a town with grit, a town that was coming back.
They do not tell the truth. They're liars. They manipulate our history books. The history books are not true. It's a lie. The history books are lying. You need to know that. You must know that.
And the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, Put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. As his other flesh. The sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshech, and Tyrus. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah.
Most Egyptologists and anthropologists, archaeologists of the Eurocentric persuasion will say that Egypt is in Africa. They had to concede that, but then they still draw the line by saying that they weren't Africans like that. In other words, they weren't dark-skinned people. And of course, this is all part of the Great Deception. And the reality is that if they give up Egypt, ancient Kemet, if they give that up and say that that was a part of black Africa, then they will also have to give up Israel. And that's why they draw the line at Egypt, because if they give up Egypt, they've got to give up Israel.
Now, we're going to go over here, and I'm going to show you where Israel sits on the African tectonic plate, which means that Israel is northeast Africa. Now, when we look at this map, this is the Sinai, okay? This is the Red Sea. This is Egypt. This is the Sinai. This is Israel. All right, this is Saudi Arabia over here. Now, if you see this in Hebrew, it says HalleluYAH Africani, the African plate. Here it is right here. Israel is sitting right here. Israel is sitting on the HalleluYAH Africani, which means that Israel is northeast Africa.
Without question, we are in northeast Africa. We are landlocked to Egypt, with the exception of the Suez Canal, which was a man-made ditch, a boundary now between, in fact, it's not even really a boundary anymore since Egypt has reclaimed the Sinai Peninsula. But nevertheless, even those of us who are Pan-Africanists in our thinking and Afrocentric, we forget and we leave off that portion of Northeast Africa and don't want to claim anything beyond that.
Europeans classified this area as the Middle East, you know, and then since this the Middle East, the other question, where the Middle West, where the Middle North, and where the Middle South? They don't have no geographical terms like that. And the only reason why they use that term, Middle East, because it disconnects the proper connotation that should go with describing this land geographically.
The staggering amounts of money acquired by the Jew shipowners and slavery dealers is better illustrated when we emphasize the many years in which this sale and purchase of human flesh was practiced. Prior to 1661, all the colonies had laws prohibiting slavery. It was in that year that the Jews had become powerful enough to bring about the repeal of these laws, and slavery began in earnest. The Jews had discovered that the colonists needed additional manpower to help them clear their fields for planting, helping in the construction of dwellings, and in general to help with harvesting their crops. This was particularly true of the southern states, which we have referred to earlier. The Southerners had vast tracts of rich soil suitable for rice, cotton, tobacco, and cane sugar. At first, impoverished Europeans were recruited. English prison doors were opened, and finally prisoners of war from England and Holland were brought to the colonies, made to work until they had paid the cost of transporting them by ship and then set free. It doesn't take a Jew long to discover what his brothers are doing, so a group of Jews settled in Charleston, South Carolina, where they set up distilleries for making rum and whiskey. They too learned that they could trade with the natives on the west coast of Africa for ivory, and several ships were purchased and sent to Africa, trading the usual glass beads and other cheap ornaments for ivory, which, however, took up but little space on board the ship. It occurred to these Jew traders that they could supply the plantations in the south with black ivory, needed under swampy and malarial conditions which European labor could not tolerate without sickness, and which would not only fill the holds of their ships, but bring enormous profits. This same group had earlier tried selling Indians as slaves, but they found them completely unsatisfactory, as the Indians would not tolerate this type of work. Thus, another segment of the slave trading had become active and profitable outside of Charleston, South Carolina. Several shipholds of black slaves were sent by the Dutch West Indies Company to Manhattan. During this time, there were a number of plantation owners established in the West Indies, and two Jews, Urjair and Sayir, with strong Rothschild connections in Spain, formed an agency called Asiento, which later operated in Holland and England. It was through these connections that Jews in Holland and England exerted influence, and both of these connections cooperated in helping the Jews provide black slaves for the colonists. With the yearly capture and transport of 1 million black slaves, it is not difficult to figure that from 1661 to 1774, 113 years, approximately 110 million slaves had been removed from their native land. About 10%, or 11 million, black slaves reached the colonies alive.
Dan Gertler is a 38-year-old Israeli billionaire who's one of the biggest investors here in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Dan Gertler first came here in 1997 at the height of a war that killed millions and millions of people, and he came to invest in diamonds. And since then he's expanded his business empire to include copper and cobalt. Congo is one of the richest countries in the world in terms of natural resources, and Dan Gertler is the biggest player here. He has his fingers in almost every single piece of the pie in Congo.
Dan Gertler basically started off as a diamond trader. He's the grandson of the founder of Israel's Diamond Exchange. He comes from a very wealthy family. He flew around the world trading rough diamonds. and quickly made a fortune. He claims that by the age of 23, he had a turnover of $2 billion a year. He invested that money mainly in Congo, and by buying up different mines and by either developing them himself or selling them on to other partners. And usually it's been the latter. The allegation has been that other companies are paying to develop mines that he owns. So he's kind of getting a free ride. This is something he denies.
Dan Gertler is incredibly private. You never see him out in Congo or in Tel Aviv. He spends a lot of time with his family. He's very religious. He loves business. He gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning to study the Bible, and then it's business, business all day. He's always flying back and forth between Congo and Tel Aviv. He doesn't have hobbies. He is constantly checking his BlackBerry. He's constantly involved in you know, wheeling and dealing.
In Israel, he's very big into charity. He supports a lot of organizations, hospitals, orphanages, a lot of religious institutions.
He prays 3 times a day. He's strictly kosher. He spends 5 days in the Congo every week, and then he makes sure to be back Friday afternoon for the Sabbath.
He's a personal friend of President Joseph Kabila. The controversy surrounding him is whether this friendship to President Kabila has resulted in him getting sweetheart deals from the government. And he now is in major partnerships with global giants like Glencore, like Eurasian Natural Resources Corp, you know, big FTSE 100 listed companies. He rejects all allegations regarding corruption. He says that he's taken huge risk in a country that's very unpredictable. A lot of companies won't even come to Congo because they don't know what's going to happen, whether their title is secure. His comeback is, well, show me the proof that I have actually ever engaged in corruption. And, you know, there is no black on white evidence to show that he has bribed anyone.
There's a group called Global Witness that focuses on Africa and you know, kind of the vulture capitalism where people from outside you know, make a lot of money out of the mineral wealth and don't give back to the country. The Congo is one of the poorest countries in the world. People work in these mines for a pittance, and he's making billions. So that is the rap against him. The bottom line, he says, if somebody doesn't want to do business with me, that's fine. I can find other partners.
It is a land filled with paradox. Squeezed into the landscape of Africa's western coast, Sierra Leone is one of the poorest nations on earth. Ranked second to last on the United Nations Human Development Index, the average income of its citizens is a scant $220 per year. Conversely, Sierra Leone is rich in natural resources. Verdant tropical forests stretch far into its interior. Just under its fertile soil lies a bounty of the world's most sought-after gems.
The value of Sierra Leone diamonds is about $200 a carat on average, which is a lot bigger, a lot higher than other diamonds. Diamond dealers, people who know about diamonds, say that Sierra Leone diamonds are special. They have a special light to them, special color.
In a land beset with abject poverty, the discovery of diamonds seemingly should have brought great fortune.
The pedigree of being a diamondiferous country has always been a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a blessing because it brings with it the promise of vast wealth and riches that can be lavished upon the people of the country. But on the other hand, it also invites chaos.
In Sierra Leone, it's mostly been chaos. From 1991 to 2001, an uncommonly brutal war raged between government forces and a rebel group called the RUF, the Revolutionary United Front. A war funded in part by diamonds.
They said they were fighting for democracy, but they fought against civilians. And they use diamonds to fuel the whole thing. They use diamonds to get the guns to fight the war.
It's estimated as many as 75,000 were killed, often in the most horrific manner. 2 million people, about half the population, were displaced.
Good afternoon. I am Malens, and I come from the richest country in the world. It is located in the richest continent in the world, in the west of the richest continent. My country is called Sierra Leone. On the surface, we are blessed with infinite beauty and abundance of flora and fauna, producing the most exquisite harvest of coffee, cocoa, fruits, vegetables, and caoutchouc. You name it, we've got it. We also have diverse wildlife and vast marine resources, and waterfalls and rivers that run into the most beautiful beaches. The land is golden, literally, a true paradise, which of course is inhabited by the most beautiful souls. We have a very strong cultural heritage. In fact, Sierra Leone had the first sub-Saharan university. Prior to that, there was one in the kingdom of Timbuktu, which was the first university in the world, succeeding the great Gnostic schools of Egypt and Osiris. On a deeper level, we are blessed with the real treasures the kings and queens of this world desire. This was the largest alluvial diamond ever found. It weighs almost 1,000 carats, 969 to be precise. This beauty was found by an old lady in her backyard about 2 years ago, 125 carats. Some people mine gold in their backyards. That's quite common. Besides gold and diamonds, we have about 20 precious minerals that have been discovered as of today. We recently started extracting huge petroleum reserves that have been discovered. We have platinum, ilmenite to make titanium, rutile to coat jets, iron ore, the largest iron ore deposits in Africa, the third largest in the world. Tantalite, also known as coltan, used in your mobile phones and computers. Bauxite for aluminum production. Zinc, chrome ore, copper, coal, phosphates, potassium, salt, lead, granite, asbestos, nickel, zircon. Furthermore, we have exquisite timber like mahogany, antique. And we have the most beautiful stamps in the world. Of course, the West needs Africa's resources most desperately to power airplanes, cell phones, computers, and engines. And the gold and diamonds, of course, a status symbol to determine their powers by their core and to give value to their currencies. One thing that keeps me puzzled, despite having studied finance and economics at the world's best universities, the following question remains unanswered. Why is it that 5,000 units of our currency is worth 1 unit of your currency, where we are the ones with the actual gold reserves? It's quite evident that the aid is in fact not coming from the West to Africa, but from Africa to the Western world. The Western world depends on Africa in every possible way, since alternative resources are scarce out here. So how does the West ensure that the free aid keeps coming? By systematically destabilizing the wealthiest African nations and their systems, and all that backed by huge PR campaigns, leaving the entire world under the impression that Africa is poor and dying and merely surviving on the mercy of the West. Well done, Oxfam, UNICEF, Red Cross, Life Aid, and all the other organizations that continuously run multi-million-dollar advertisement campaigns depicting charity porn to sustain that image of Africa globally. Ad campaigns paid for by innocent people under the impression to help with their donations. While one hand gives under the flashing lights of cameras, the other takes in the shadows. We all know the dollar is worthless, while the euro is merely charged with German intellect and technology, and maybe some Italian pasta. How can one expect donations from nations that have so little? It's super sweet of you to come with your colored paper in exchange for our gold and diamonds. But instead, you should come empty-handed, filled with integrity and honor. We want to share with you our wealth and invite you to share with us. The perception is that a healthy and striving Africa would not disperse its resources as freely and cheaply, which is logical. Of course, it would instead sell its resources at world market prices, which in turn would destabilize and weaken Western economies, established on the post-colonial free meal system.
This is one of the thousands of unregulated, unmonitored mines in the DRC. It's crawling with children, working like modern-day slaves. A 12-hour-long day of punishing work may earn them the equivalent of £1. Although one of the poorest countries on earth, DRC is rich in minerals. But a history of brutal colonial exploitation looks like being repeated now in 2017. Much of it's mined by hand with rudimentary tools in harsh, potentially hazardous conditions. And wretched whether or not, the rush is on for a mineral the DRC has in great abundance, cobalt, and it's fast becoming more precious than gold. It's a critical ingredient in lithium-ion batteries which power smartphones and laptops. An army of children are at the heart of the mining production. Wearing no shoes and in the most wretched conditions, Dorsan is ordered to retrieve the sack he's forgotten. There's an urgency now. The rains make this dangerous work even more risky, and Dorsan's told in no uncertain terms he risks a beating if he messes up again. Dorsan, with Richard beside him, have worked all day. They're 8 and 11 years old. Even this punishing work doesn't guarantee enough for food. Dorsan hasn't eaten for 2 days now. This is what helpless looks like, and he's one of the children making millions for multinational corporations in America and China whilst they suffer in squalor. For this, they'll get maybe 8 British pence a day.
Walitusukuma tunaenda tena tunarudia. Ndio nashikia sana mkongo inauma. Mimi natumia mkongo nilimaka na mbavu na nikula kinapita kile nyuma.
Mine heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. The birds round about are against her. Come ye, assemble all the beasts of the field, come to devour. Many pastors have destroyed my vineyard. They have trodden my portion under foot. They have made my pleasant portion a desolate wilderness.
Eccola qua, la mia fabbrica di negri. Di quassù potete farvene un'idea. Gli affari andavano a rotoli. Cotone e tabacco erano in crisi. Allora ho preso il coraggio a due mani e ho trasformato la piantagione in farm d'allevamento. E devo dire che ho fatto bene, perché la nuova legge che proibisce l'importazione di negri dall'Africa ha rialzato quasi del doppio il mercato degli schiavi. E poi, dopo tutto...
Ehi, pa! È arrivato Mr. Wilson! È qui!
Buongiorno, signor Bigorn. Ho portato la negra. Eccola.
Li hai contati bene i giorni? Ma sei proprio sicuro che è in calore?
Certo che è in calore. È giusto pronta per la monta. Se gli diamo subito il maschio, sono sicuro che attacca.
Va bene, va bene. Quanti giorni sono che ha finito il sangue?
Mia moglie ne ha contati 12. Saranno 13 con il viaggio. Se me la fa montare subito, fra 2 ore al massimo levo il disturbo.
Me la regali, pa?
Di queste cose ne riparleremo dopo gli esami. Per ora pensa a studiare. Su, avanti.
Uffa.
Lì, è sana?
Certo.
Non ha mica le piattole?
Ma che dice? L'ho tenuta sempre in casa.
Allora è vergine.
Sicuro. Lo sa che la serbavo per Giasone.
Cosa? Una vergine per uno stallone come quello? Ma quello te la sventra.
Se la sventra la ricucio. Non si preoccupi. Lei lo sa che questa la potevo far montare per meno di $50 e a 2 passi da casa. Se ho fatto 60 miglia per pagarne 200 è perché mi piace la razza di Giasone.
Va bene, va bene.
Andiamo su, che lo sa benissimo anche lei, che un altro toro come quello non lo trovo.
Contento te, sono affari tuoi.
Giasone, lo stallone a 3 gambe!
Ciao, generale!
Giasone, lo stallone... Come va l'artrite di suo padre?
Un po' meglio da quando fa gli impacchi di negro alle gambe.
Lei ha ragione, signor Bigorn. Vino buono e carne di mori succhia ai vecchi artriti e dolori.
Sarà, ma poi io mi ritrovo la cucciolata con l'artrite. Ehi, Wilson, guarda lì.
Dove?
Lì, davanti, in quel vetro.
Perché?
Boh, quei giornalisti vogliono sempre che si guardi dentro quel vetro.
Per me?
Beh, va pure ad aspettarmi alle stalle, io vengo subito.
D'accordo.
Prima devo sbrigare questi signori.
D'accordo, signor Bigorn.
Cupido, portami ancora della canna da zucchero! Sono quasi tutti dell'annata del 43. Annata buona! La moria fu soltanto del 25%. Di solito è del 40-60, soprattutto per la rosolia, che per il sangue umano è niente. Ma questi li ammazza.
Come mai tanti biondi?
Ma cosa volete che vi dica? Qualcuno forse è mio, parecchi sono di mio fratello. Qualcuno è del prete e qualcuno sarà di qualche ospite di passaggio. Basta, basta. Basta, ora basta, golosi. Basta. Queste sono le fattrici. Con i nuovi stalloni House e Mandingo che comprai 3 anni fa, sono riuscito ad averle pregne all'86%, con un intervallo tra una figliata e l'altra di meno di 60 giorni. Ma dove siete? Ehi, venite qua, guardate questa. La perla nera dell'allevamento, 7 gemelli in 6 anni. E sono sicuro che anche questa volta ce ne sono 2 qui dentro. Questa manza da sola vale un patrimonio. Venite! Venite dentro! Accidenti, che fortuna avete! Venite a vedere come nasce un piccolo bastardo! Bello, eh? Sarà 6 o 7 libri almeno. Sapete una cosa? Questo ve lo dedico, lo chiamerò Maccaroni. Brava Cleopatra, chi era il maschio?
Non sapessi.
Come non sapessi?
Non sapessi. Te mi facesse montare da Plutone e non impregnassi. Poi da 4 maschi nuovi non sapessi.
Non ha importanza.
Non sapessi.
Comunque l'hai fatto bello. Vedi che il padrone rispetta la parola? E il premio? $1 a cucciolo. Tradizione di famiglia.
Altra tradizione molto cara agli allevatori era quella di presentare ogni anno alle grandi fiere del sud nuove razze pregiate che, come avviene oggi per i cavalli, portavano il nome della famiglia. La razza Bighorn, celebre per la precocità delle sue femmine già pronte per la monta al 10° anno di età, fruttò al proprietario 2 medaglie d'oro alla fiera di Jackson.
Ehi voi, portatemi Poppea! Ho detto Poppea! Ma guarda che imbecilli! No! Quella è Circe, buttala giù! Ah! No, quella!
Qui in Louisiana la proporzione era di un maschio da monta ogni 5 di queste femmine. Ma in Virginia, un grande specialista del tempo, il Catterall, indicò come proporzione ideale un maschio per 8 femmine. E infatti su questa base la Virginia produsse oltre 6.000 negri l'anno. Era l'epoca d'oro in cui le grandi fattorie d'allevamento, come la famosa North Carolina Planter, erano perfino quotate in borsa.
Ora ditemi un po' se non ci vuole del talento per inventare una razza come questa. Vedete, per creare un incrocio, l'allevatore attinge alle varie razze come un artista ai suoi colori. Un po' di bianco qua, un po' di nero là, qui un colpetto di rosso, là uno sbaffo di giallo. Finché salta fuori qualcosa che non è nero, non è bianco, non è rosso, non è giallo, ma è un capolavoro.
Piglialo! Paralo con la forza, da quella parte!
Uno schiavo che scappa. Ma no, ha paura del marchio. Succede sempre con gli stalloni nuovi.
Compiuto il 18° anno d'età, alla vigilia della sua prima prestazione, il nuovo stallone veniva marcato a fuoco con un segno convenzionale che evitava sbagli e confusioni sui registri di monta.
Can you speak a little bit about colorism in Brazil and how it impacts interracial relationships?
Sure. The first time I experienced colorism, and at that time there wasn't this word colorism for us. For me, it's a new concept, but the practice is very old. It's an old practice. It's an old mentality, an old mindset. But I have an example in my own family. For example, my grandmother was black. She used it to tell her daughters, my mom and my aunties, to marry only white men. Why? To purify our blood from the African ancestry. So, one day I asked other black people in Brazil if they had been told the same story on their families, and they confirmed. Also, in other black families in Brazil, there was this mentality of purifying the blood by interracial marriage. So this, we call it in Portuguese, branqueamento. It's the idea that the more you get near to white features, you are being more good, more acceptable for society. It's no wonder that here in Brazil, even among black people, the black people we have light skin, many times they are preferred to commercial or TV roles, preferred over black people who's got darker skin. That's a reality. Nobody can deny it.
Bonjour, Marcel. Bonjour, Marcel. Zazu, look after my son. Yes. And you too, Lisette. Protect him the way that I protect you and your mother.
He needs more than a slave girl's protection, monsieur.
He's my son. He'll be a gentleman, a man of property. He'll have the best of everything.
Except your name?
He has freedom. More important than any name.
Here. In New Orleans, where there are thousands more like him. But only here. If he leaves, he'll face the same prejudice people of color have faced since the first slave ship left Africa.
I cannot give him my name.
You can give him Paris.
He's a little young for Paris, you see.
When the time comes, when he's 18.
We'll see.
Paris is different, monsieur. Color doesn't matter there. His freedom will be complete. I want that for him. Promise me you'll send him to Paris.
I promise. When he's 18, our son, Marcel, will go to Paris.
For 4 years. A proper education.
I'll deposit money in the bank for him.
At once.
Would you take it out of my pockets?
She would take a pledge written in blood.
A contract drawn up by your attorney will do, monsieur. I should have it to review by week's end.
Stop it. It's a beautiful name. Marcel.
That's right. He ain't coming. Oh, you don't say. Honey, why don't you get smart and just disappear?
Celeste, you know you really ought to try and show some manners. Even if you don't know what they are.
Get out of here. Leave.
Funny. I get the feeling that you forget this is my club. And you're the one that's on her way out.
Don't you get uppity with me.
Uppity? With you? My dear, talking to you means I look nowhere but down.
You dirty nigger! Oh!
Many of the noses that you see on Egyptian statues, whether they're in exhibits in museums or in Egypt itself, are gone. The noses are gone. And it's not because they disintegrated. It's because they were removed by either early Christians or the Muslims after 640 AD. Remember, if you change the image of an individual, you no longer have an actual image of a human being if you remove the nose. That was the perception at the time. So that's why 95% approximately of all Egyptian statuettes that had noses no longer do.
Count Constantine de Volney, during a trip to Egypt from 1783 to 1785, said this, and I quote, he says, "On seeing that head," what head? The Sphinx of Giza. "Typically Negro in all its features, I remembered the remarkable passage of Herodotus, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans. Just to think that this race of black men today are slaves and the object of scorn, the very race to which we owe our arts, sciences, and even the use of speech." Now, I want to ask this question. What would motivate him to say this phrase, typically Negro in all its features? Could it be perhaps this? This was an artist's conception, Vivant Denon, who accompanied Napoleon's army, 1798. This is his artist's conception of the Sphinx of Giza. Before what happened? Before the lips and the nose were shot off by Napoleon's troops. That is verifiable because Denon was an eyewitness to those lips and the lips and nose being shot off by the soldiers.
I want to say I'm sorry that my English is not so good, but I will try, you know, to explain or to teach the people that don't know that we are here in this land before maybe more in 2,000 of years in this area, in Sinai Desert. It's not far from here. It's near the Jordan-Israeli border. There is our land, my grandfather's land. So before, you know, before the state of Israel, the border of this Israel or Palestine is not in this border today. It's very near. Before it's El Arish in Egypt today. There is the border of this, the holy land. This is the religion thing. So many people they don't know that the black people here in this land, it's not for the last 100 years or something like this. It's more than 1,000 of years. All this tribe you see the Bedouin here, you tell them. This will tell you I'm from Arab Saudia, the original. This tribe will tell you, yeah, I'm from north of Jordan. Everybody will tell you he's not original for in this land. He came, not me.
But you came. Did you originally?
They came. But me,
yeah.
I say I'm here. So they have to be clear. If you discuss with them, okay, they say, all of you come here, okay? Who was living this land?
They say it's a black man.
The black man. And before maybe 2,000 and a half, there's the Hebrews. The Hebrews.
The Hebrews were black as well, right?
Yeah, there was in this land, there was just the Bedouin, the black Bedouin like me, and the Hebrews. That's it.
One of the things that we have to understand is that Sheikh Aid, men like Sheikh Aid and others who are the Afro-Bedouins, the Afro-Palestinians in this land, many of them are actually the original peoples of this land. When you go back to the earlier Zionist thinkers, and I'm going all the way back to Berekov, who was the theoretician of the Zionist left, that he actually referred to them as most probably these people that were living in the land prior to the establishment of the state, that they were most probably descendants of the early Judeans and the early Canaanites. And of course the Canaanites were an African people, sons of Ham.
We are deeply rooted in this country. We are talking about generations and generation and generation. For example, the picture which I have over here. Now look at the picture pretty well. The man holding the rope of the camel. The man holding the rope of the camel is the Caliph Umar bin Khattab. He is the third man after Prophet Muhammad.
Caliph Ma?
Caliph Umar bin Khattab. When he came to Jerusalem, look at the one who's riding the camel. He's a brother. You can say we began when the Islam came to Palestine, but I'm quite sure we are even before and before and before.
The Israeli author Shlomo Sand, in his book The Invention of the Jewish People, between the pages of 184 and 188, he goes into great depth talking about the early Zionist thinkers like Ber Borakov and even David Ben-Gurion. He quotes David Ben-Gurion and Ben Zvi, Yitzhak Ben Zvi, talking about the fact that the early Judean peasants were actually the foundation of what they encountered when they came into this land. This is a book they wrote 30 years prior to the declaration of Israel's independence, and they recognized that the Felahim, this peasant class, were actually those that had remained here, that had converted perhaps to Islam, that had converted perhaps to Christianity, depending on the ruling class, depending on the armies at the time that held Jerusalem and held this particular region. They simply, in their love for the land and the fact that these armies needed to be fed, they became the peasant class, the agrarian agronomists, the agriculturalists who continued to raise their crops and to take care of their families in a desire to stay on this land.
many black people there was here in this land. I see, for example, I want to tell you that thing. That history is in the history before maybe 2,000 years, something like that. There is in this area was a black tribe is called Beni Hilal. Then they say Zayd al-Halali. Everybody know. Everybody in all the Arab wars, if you saw you so strong, you this, they say, what, you are Zayd al-Halali. He was a very brave black man, very strong, very rightness. He like the right, he know the truth, he fight here in this land. Everybody know from the history, even today, in our tribe, they remember this man.
I have a book called The Arabs. I believe the author's name was Bertrand Thomas. On page 339, he says the original inhabitants of Arabia were not the more familiar Arabs of our own time, but a very much darker people. Now, why would you write a book on the Arabs and then tuck that little sentence away on page 339 talking about the original people? It's obvious that certain historians and anthropologists have something that they want to hide or that they don't want out front. And of course, the color of the people of this land in antiquity, that's what they don't want to be known.
Even today, you see most of the blacks, because the war and here in the Middle East in the last maybe 100 years or 200 years, some of my family today, there's in Egypt, some of them in Jordan, some of them in the Palestinian Authority, and they know the original. They say we are from this Negev, this area. See, we are the same family. There is in Jericho too. We are in the same family. We live here in this land, but you know, a policy or political or and we don't care that we are not new here. But you know, the government before the Turkish people come here, they control this land for 400 years, and they left, and we stay in the desert. Then the English, the government of English people, they come here, maybe control some of a little time, and they left, and we stay here, and now it's the Israeli, and we stay here, and we could continue to stay in this land, and we trying, you know, to let the people know that you know, everybody new one come here with the power, with the gun, with the muscles, with this is my land. But people, they have to know the truth. If you have the truth, you have the power, you have to be strength, you have to know. That's like I'm saying, everybody here, if you not have no right, you will go. I will stay here for 1,000 of years in the future.
There is no Middle East area. If you sit here in Israel, you have a border with Egypt. So Egypt is in Africa. So how I can say this is Middle East? To me, it's Africa land. Blacks from Africa back to home, and also from Africa, from here, we've been there. And also, for most of the blacks, they have a confusion about Israel. This is your home. This is your land.
This is Africa. This is Africa.
The Europeans, I mean, because we know the Europeans classify this as the Middle East. But this is Africa.
This is Africa. This is north of Africa. Now they make Libya and Morocco and Tunis, they say it's North Africa. It's west, the west. We are in the north.
This is the Mediterranean Sea right here. So people say, well, why do you say, but it's Asia Minor? You know, when Europeans be talking about this Asia Minor, I ask them, where's Europe Minor? Where's America Minor? Okay, this is the only continent with a minor. And you know what that minor is? It's a minor lie. It's really a major lie. Understand what you're talking about? Some Asia Minor. Where's Europe Minor? Where's America Minor? But see, when they say Asia Minor, they don't have to classify this land as being part of the African continent. And they want to call it the Middle East. The middle of what?
אני הולכת להכין קושרי, שזה אוכל מצרי, שהוא בעצם אורז פסטה ועדשים שחורים עם שני רטבים, רוטב של עגבניות ורוטב של שום חריף. המנה הזאת היא מנה מצרית. המשפחה שלי באה ממצרים, מאל-פיום, ואני, סלמה פיומי, באה מאל-פיום.
عجزت مصر أن تمد قطاع غزة ب2 مليون أو 1.5 مليون من الوقود. يا أخوانا احنا عددنا في غزة 1,800,000. عدد مصر حوالي 90 مليون. يعني لو تيجي احنا قديش النسبة؟ نسبة بسيطة جدا، تقريبا 2%. 2%. يعني لا نشكل عليكم ضغط مطلقا. الأقصى وأهل فلسطين يمثلون رأس حربة للإسلام والمسلمين، ولذلك عندما نستنجد بإخواننا العرب لا نستنجد لنأكل ولنعيش ولنشرب ولنلبس ولنترفه، لا، عندما نستنجد إنما نستنجد لنواصل الجهاد. والحمد لله أصولنا كلنا عربية، ويستطيع كل فلسطيني في غزة وفي كل فلسطين أن يأتي بجذوره العربية، سواء كانت من السعودية أو من اليمن أو من أي نفط، ولذلك قد تربطنا قرابات. ولذلك أين المودة؟ أين الرحمة؟ أنا شخصيا نص عائلتي مصرية كلنا، ويمكن بيجي حوالي أكثر من 30 عائلة اسمها المصري. في أساسنا نص فلسطين يا أخواننا مصري ونص سعودي. إيش من هم الفلسطينيون؟
to commit to political action, grassroots action, local action, and international action that will give us what justice requires. And that is a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you for your time.
The success of Muhammadan Islam in deceiving, misinforming, deforming, and contorting both history and reality over a period of almost 1400 years has been astounding. That is, until now. The greatest tragedy about this particular subject is that most of the descendants of African slavery, the black people in the Americas, around the world, as well as among the African blacks, are totally ignorant of the actual facts. Before we lose the concentration of our listeners, I would like to make the following statement and then prove it. That the worst, most inhumane and most diabolical institution of the black African slave trade was initiated, refined, perpetrated, and implemented by the Mohammedan Arabs and later aided and abetted by the black converts to Mohammedan Islam. In fact, the very word slavery has its root in the name Slav, based upon the Slavic peoples of Europe who were subjugated by other Europeans. It is not common knowledge that the Arabic word abd is synonymous with the meaning of slave. For example, Abdullah means literally the slave of Allah, and that in the language of the Arabs, all black peoples are called abid, plural, for slaves. While much has been written concerning the transatlantic slave trade, surprisingly little attention has been paid to the Islamic slave trade across the Sahara, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean. While the European involvement in the African transatlantic slave trade to the Americas lasted for just over 3 centuries, the Arab involvement in the African slave trade has lasted 14 centuries. The birth of Mohammedan Islam and its conquests brought about the birth of institutionalized, systematized, and religiously sanctioned slave trade on a massive and global scale. In fact, the Quran allows the taking of slaves as booty or reward for wars of aggression against any and all unbelievers. Incredible and heinous abuses have occurred throughout the history of Mohammedan Islam. By the Middle Ages, the Arabic word abd was in general used to denote a black slave. Ibn Khaldun, 1332 to 1406, the preeminent Islamic medieval historian and social thinker, wrote, "The Negro nations are, as a rule, submissive to slavery, because they have attributes that are quite similar to dumb animals." It should also be noted that black slaves were castrated based on the assumption that the blacks had an ungovernable sexual appetite. When the Fatimid Caliphate came to power in Egypt, they slaughtered all the tens of thousands of black military slaves and raised an entirely new slave army. Some of these slaves were conscripted into the army at age 10. From Persia to Egypt to Morocco, slave armies from 30,000 to up to 250,000 became commonplace. The Islamic slave trade took place across the Sahara Desert, from the coast of the Red Sea, and from East Africa across the Indian Ocean. The Trans-Sahara trade was conducted along 6 major slave routes. A comparison of the Islamic slave trade to the American slave trade reveals some extremely interesting contrasts. While 2 out of every 3 slaves shipped across the Atlantic were men, the proportions were reversed in the Islamic slave trade. 2 women for every man were enslaved by the Muslims.
سلام. سلام.
السلام عليكم.
يلا
هذا الخايف.
مرحبا.
أهلا.
ايش اسمك؟
إيمان.
شو بتاكلي إيمان؟
كرمبو. لا رص عبد.
رص عبد؟
احنا الصبر بنقول عنه كرمبو والبيض بقول عنه رص عبد.
ما بتزعلي لما حدا بيقول لك رص عبد؟
بزعل. بصيح.
راس الكوشي مترجلين شرايين زي الشوكولات بتسافع الشخور از عمرهم زي راس الكوشي كرمبو زي از لبنان عمرهم زي راس كوشي.
אומרים כושי? מה המילה שהיא אומרת?
يعبد.
יעבד.
כן.
יעבד אבל זה לא כושי, לא?
הכושי זה עבד.
אבל זה כאילו, זה מעליב או שזה בדיחה או שמה זה?
לא, זה לא בדיחה. אם מישהו אומר לי ראש כושי אני אהרוג אותו.
רעיון מאוד יפה.
הבא משנייה.
Let's go.
بس صار مثلا على ايامكم واحد ابيض مثلا خدم كان ياخذ مصاري مقابل خدمه
بيخدم. لا بيخدم اللي الفقير بيخدم.
الفقير بس عشان الاغلب كانوا سمر عشان كده سموه يعني
انسان فقير وسموه يعني اسمه عبد.
هو ماشي كوشم هيو. طيب حسب رايك بتشوف في عنصريه عند السمر من كل الانحاء يعني في كل هنا؟
ما أنا شايف عنصرية علاش أنا مسلم وأنت مسلمة.
صح.
أنا عربي وأنت عربية. أنا بحكي نفس اللغة وأنت بتحكي نفس اللغة. أنتوا بتجاملوني وأنا بجاملكم في الفرح وفي الكره. فما أنا شايف أي عنصرية.
صح. إذا بتتذكر قبل 4 سنين كان في واحد اسمه رشاد العبيد اللي هو اتجوز مع واحدة بيضة واجبروه ايش انه يطلقها والحين هو عايش برا البلاد وهو مهدد الحين في الكتب. ولا شايف الموضوع هذا؟ بس عشان اصلا هو اتجوز واحدة بيضة.
سؤال ثاني.
Flood. Genesis 10:6 refers to the Hamites as the sons of Ham, who inhabited North and Northeast Africa. The sons are Cush, which is present-day Ethiopia, Mizraim, present-day Egypt, Put, present-day Libya, and Canaan, which is present-day Palestine, Israel. The African presence is still visible in Israel today. There are thousands of African Palestinians who live in Israel with deep roots to the land, whose ancestors date back for centuries. I met with YAHUWAH, tour guide, and the informal mayor of the African Palestinians in Old Jerusalem. I asked him about his life and relations between the Afro-Arabs and the Jews.
Well, life for him, I think it's the hell. I'm one of those people who had experienced that. To be Palestinian, that's a big problem. But to be a black Palestinian, I'm quite convinced it will be the hell. Because as a black Palestinian, I am double oppressed. Double oppressed by the Israelis.
In what way?
In what way? I will explain. First of all, they oppress me as a Palestinian. You see. Secondly, they oppress me because of my color. Whenever I go around in the Israeli side, they call me Kushi. Kushi means nigger. Kushi means nigger.
So, in Israel, the land of God, people who are the brothers of the Arabs, 2 brothers, you are called nigger as I am called nigger in America?
Let's say on the surface, This is what they say, that this is the land of God and we are cousins and there should be total equality. But once you come to the practice, when you come on ground, you will find that there is a lot of discrimination and there is a real divorce between what they say and what they exercise.
Blacks and whites who watch the show saying, so why stay? Why stay when you are called nigger every day? Why stay when you are denied your rights?
On the contrary, the more they humiliate me, the more they oppress me, the more I stick to my land. Because this is my land. I'm so rooted. We are deeply rooted as Africans, as Palestinian Africans in this land. And we know pretty well that our ancestors, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States. So the more they exercise brutality, the more they exercise oppression against me, the more we are determined to stay, because this is our homeland, and we have a message, we have a holy message, that this land should be the land of real peace, not the false peace that they are talking about it now.
As I did the interview, I couldn't help but be amazed at the dismal setting. We were in Old Jerusalem, in the city of walls, sitting in an old jail called Prison's Gate.
It had been built by the Mamluks. The Mamluks.
Which are?
They are Arabs, Muslims who came from Syria and occupied this area. We are talking about a period of 1358. About 600-700 years old, this place. Then afterwards, this place was taken by the Turks. When the Turkish Empire occupied the whole area over here. So those places were transferred to jails. Originally, those places were built for pilgrims, people who come from Mecca, outsiders. So the Mamluks wanted some places where they can stay, where they can serve them, give them food, and they have toilets, all these things. But once the Turks came over here, they transferred those places to prison. In the place you are sitting just now, they used to locate people who were sentenced to life, while in the other section, they used to locate people who were sentenced to death. Okay, I have a dream. I have a dream. It's not only me, all my people over here, that a day will come and we will have better conditions so that we can move from this prison, you see. But I think it's not only the name that gives it that definition, it's a prison.
And the name is?
In the meantime, I can say the whole area, the whole place that we are living is a prison, is a jail.
Not just this building?
No, not just this building. I'm talking about, in general, about the total situation. You can live in a very bombarded villa, apartment, outside, but you are still in jail because you are deprived of your freedom, of expression. Try to imagine I'm living in a big villa, a millionaire. I have a Pontiac, 1997. Once I go in the street, they call me nigger. So what does it mean? It's nothing. It's nothing in front of my self-dignity, my personal dignity, my human dignity. I think I can talk that we are living in a big jail.
But within Africa itself, that was a great event that has been forgotten. Concurrent with the slave trade, and almost at the same time it began, in inner Africa, the last of the great African nation states had not died. Sangay still existed and would exist up until 1591, when it was invaded by Morocco. The Arab influence came from East Africa, from the island of Zanzibar. Now, the Arab influence came from what is now Kuwait and Oman. These East African Arabs, these southern Western Asian Arabs,
turned Zanzibar into one of the largest slave trading ports in the history. You wonder, where did these slaves go? Some of them went to Asia. Some of them were traded with the Portuguese. But the Arabs at a given time took up to 40 million Africans out of Africa.
The Arabs.
Yeah, and except for the energy and the manpower and the organization that the Arabs and the Arab slave trade drained out of Africa, Africa would have had enough energy and organization to resist the European slave trade. The Arab slave trade was one of the great tragedies in the history of Africa. And it is a tragedy equal to, if not surpassing, the European slave trade.
You had 9 countries that were involved in the slave trade. They had 3 slave trade routes. You had the Atlantic Ocean. Everybody always talk about the Middle Passage. The Middle Passage wasn't anything compared to the other passages. And the Middle Passage coming across the Atlantic, where everybody likes to focus on. You see that on the wall all the time. The Middle Passage, talking about the European slave trade. That was one. But you had 2 other slave trades. You had also had an Indian Ocean slave trade that was going up out of Africa and going around through India, Pakistan, down into Cambodia, Vietnam, and the islands, New Guinea and place. That's why all those blacks are down in those islands. That's why all these Indians you see in this country that are darker than you all are, most of you in here, and they call themselves whites. They came out of the Indian Ocean. That's why you go through all those Pakistani Indians that are dark skinned, and the Cambodians, the Vietnamese. They had an Indian slave trade going around that way. And the other one was going right up through the central, and that was called the Arab slave trade. But in all these slave trades, the primary producer and procurer for slavery were basically Arabs. You need to know that. I know it might hurt some of your feelings. I'm going to tell you, but Arabs, you cannot jump on whites and start talking about reparations from whites in Europe unless you also start talking about reparations from the Arabs. Okay? You got to get them to... And instead of when they start talking about oil wells, you all start saying, all those oil wells coming out of Iraq, they need to be coming to black folk in America. Okay?
Before the meeting even began, disputes flared about efforts to equate Zionism with racism and to call for reparations for slavery. It took 9 long days for a meeting called to promote racial tolerance and diversity to work through the fundamental disagreements that sparked a U.S. walkout. The United Nations' Mary Robinson chaired the conference.
It has been, as I said, exhausting. I know I've missed my plane, and I'm sure that everyone will benefit from a break, but not for too long. There is much work to be done. We have made a beginning. Thank you very much.
Robinson applauded what she said was the meeting's chief accomplishment, the carefully brokered declaration condemning slavery and the transatlantic slave trade as a, quote, crime against humanity. But African delegates wanted an explicit apology for slavery, plus specific promises of compensation or reparations for slavery's victims. The delegation from the European Union refused to accept
South African comedian and The Daily Show host Trevor Noah sparked anger on social media when in a segment compared EFF leader Julius Malema with US President Donald Trump this past weekend.
South Africa also has a popular anti-establishment politician in this election. His name is Julius Malema. And if you think Trump is bad, wait until you see how Julius treats the press.
He then goes on to show clips from various press conferences and events where Malema is seen speaking to and about the media.
And if you're one of those people thinking right now, you know what, Trevor, this doesn't seem too extreme. He just hates the press. Well, you might want to buckle up for... Go out! Bastards! Oh man, that is the best ending to an interview I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, forget no comment. I'm gonna go with that from now on. Trevor, why did you wear a t-shirt to the Met Gala? Bastard! Come on! Bastard! You bastard!
In a response, the EFF Floyd Shivambu took to social media to call Trevor Noah a puppet of the establishment. The comments come after Julius Malema's EFF party garnered a massive 11% vote in the just ended South African election.
Because they are scared of white people. Why? They are too old. Old people are scared of white people. White people traumatize them so much. They've beaten them, they've harassed them, they've enslaved them. I don't understand why you are young and scared of white people. They've never beaten you. They are equal to you. You have been to school. You were born after 1994. Don't be scared of white people. Confront white people. Defeat white people. These old ones, they think of prison. They are scared to go back to prison. You have never been to prison. Yet you are scared of stories of prison. Let's go to prison. If it means prison, let it be. We're not going to be scared of prison fighting for what belongs to us. We're not going to be scared of death fighting for what belongs to us. This is our land. Shaka Zulu's land. Not Van Veek and Van Tonder's land. This land belongs to Sekukuni. This land belongs to our traditional leaders who fought with these bastards. And they thought they defeated our forefathers, and they will defeat us now. Let them come. We are ready for them. We are dead as we speak now, because there's nothing to live for. Why be scared of death? You go to a toilet in a pit toilet. You don't have a house. You don't have water. You don't have electricity. You stay in a shack. When it rains, your shack is raining. Yet you are scared to die. You are dead now. What is life in a shack? What is life without water? Because water is life. What is life without electricity? What is life without education? What is life without dignity? Because only those who are dead do not have dignity. Yet you are alive without a dignity. Why are you alive? You are equal as dead. Don't be scared, black child. You are dead already. Why be scared of death? Because this thing that you live now is not life. Why be scared? I my life, I will be 38 years old. I thought this bastard would have killed me by now. This thing of mine is a bonus. That's why I don't care about these things. We are dead until our dignity is restored.
And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them, and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor shew mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. For they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly. But thus shall ye deal with them. Ye shall destroy their altars, and break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love upon you, nor choose you, because ye were more in number than any people, for ye were the fewest of all people. But because the Lord loved you, and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn unto your fathers, hath the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand, and redeemed you out of the house of bondmen, from the hand of Pharaoh king of Egypt.
Same respect for members of our race as we do for some other race, especially the white race. And that we were told, quite to the contrary, that we were from a land of savages, of cannibals. And except by the grace of God and the white man, we would have been a lost people. So we should be on our knees forever praying and thanking God that we were brought, even in slavery, to this land to escape the horrors of Africa. And this was brought in and drilled into us generation after generation.